On Insightful Inspiration, Isabelle Landreville chats with a mosaic of brilliant individuals that help shape the insights industry. We live stream episodes to LinkedIn, and you can listen on all major podcast networks. Join us, and please subscribe so you won't miss our guests' insightful inspiration and hear what drives them and how they get inspired to be successful in the insights industry and beyond. Insightful Inspiration is brought to you by Sylvester & Co., an award-winning qualitative research firm with half a century of experience.
Welcome back to episode 7 of Insightful Inspiration. Today, let's talk about the state of women in research. What are the current struggles, the successes? How have things changed in the last 17 years? Hello, I'm Isabelle Landreville, President and Chief Insight Seeker at Sylvester & Co., a woman-led qualitative research firm, where we've been aiming to understand people for 5 decades and your host of Insightful Inspiration. Today, I'm joined by a serial entrepreneur who has been a trailblazer in the market research industry, has had multiple private equity-backed exits, and an advisor to MR firms, and the founder of Women in Research. She's also the founder of ScaleHouse Consulting and co-founder of growth marketing firm Growgetter. I'm excited to chat with Kristin Luck on today's episode. Welcome to the show, Kristin.
Hi, Isabelle. Thanks for hosting me.
I think this is so exciting. And March 8th was like just Friday. I think the timing is just perfect. It's really
It really is. Yeah, for this particular discussion.
I know.
Yeah.
I think I've been excited to talk about it. And I think it's interesting because we come from various sort of spheres from the marketing research industry, which is so much broader than it used to be. So I've been a quality, probably, as you know, for about 20 years. And I always felt like qualitative research firms have been very more so female dominated or led, or I have so many sort of peers that are running their own marketing research firms that are qualies focused, but women centric or women led. And then you come from a different background and different space. And so tell me, in 2007, you actually decided to launch Women in Research. And why is that? What was kind of the story behind that and the motive there?
Yeah. So unlike yourself, I've pretty much spent all of my career on the quant or the tech side of the business. So I started out at a full service research firm. I started out at Lieberman Research Worldwide in Los Angeles, which is now Material Plus. And I pretty much worked exclusively in quantitative research. And one of the things that I noticed as I was sort of coming up in my career, and again, kind of focused on the quant side of the business before I segued over into more tech and platforms. But what I noticed is that in the earlier stages of my career that I worked almost exclusively with women. And then as my career progressed, I was working almost exclusively with men. So that was just sort of an illuminating moment for me. And to be honest, there wasn't really any great intent behind launching Women in Research when I first started putting it together. I had gotten contacted or connected with a woman who had moved into a pretty executive position at MarketCast. So I was living in Los Angeles at the time, which is sort of the epicenter of entertainment research, which is how I started my career. And a woman reached out to me from MarketCast and said, "Hey, I've joined MarketCast. I'm in this very senior position." I think she was COO at the time. And she said, I only work with men. I've only met men since I've been here, and I would really like to develop a network of female researchers. And I said, "Oh gosh, I know so many female researchers. I'll just send an email out and we'll get together for cocktails." And so, gosh, yeah, that would have been in the spring of 2007. And I think, I just sent a regular email out to my Los Angeles network. And I think we had about 50 women show up for the first cocktail get together. And we just had so much fun connecting and getting to know new folks that we decided to do it quarterly. And then one of the women ended up moving to New York and wanted to do the same sort of meetups in New York. And I can just say it's Cassandra Rowe. I think Cassandra is still at Pinterest now, but then she moved to London. We started doing events in London. Then she moved to San Francisco. Then we started doing events in San Francisco. And so I was flying around and going to every single one of these events. And then once we sort of achieved this critical mass, then I thought, well, we really have to create more structure and more of there needs to be more meaning behind what we're doing. Like, what's the ethos behind these get-togethers? What are we trying to accomplish as a group? And can we turn this into a real force in the industry for change and help create this kind of next generation of female leaders? And so that that was sort of the crux of how it all first started and came together.
Wow. And what were some of the topics back in the day that were discussed the most? Can you remember?
Yeah. Everything, it's interesting, and I think this holds true to Wire to this day. There are a lot of business topics that are discussed. So just in terms of like, how do you manage your business day to day? What are the skill sets that you need to have to get in the C-suite? Because I'm sure, as you know, conducting research and being good at that is really different than running a business day to day. And the skill sets that you need to run a business are very different than those that are needed for research. And if, like myself, I didn't go to business school. I just learned things on the fly or by screwing them up horrifically and then having to.
Which is the best way to learn, actually.
It is. It's painful. Oh my gosh, it's so painful. But I think for me, if I can make that path less painful, not just for women, but for any men that didn't grow up, with a business background either, gosh, if people can learn from my mistakes, like that's kind of the most valuable gift I think that we can impart on the next generation. So, business topics for sure, but then also a lot of work-life balance issues. So, everything from pregnancy, maternity leave, how to get back in the workforce after you've had a child, balancing relationships with work and travel. So, the topics that are discussed at Wire events, even to this day, are pretty vast in comparison, I think, to a lot of the networking events that I go to, where you focus just primarily on research and how to conduct good research and how to get the most out of research. Wire is less research specific and more about like, business issues, and also like how do you have a fuller, more balanced life.
Do we define, and I say we because we're two women, do we define success maybe more holistically, have you found?
I think so, and particularly as you get older, I think, even for me in the earlier stages of my career, success was all about, am I getting promoted? Am I making more money? How's my business doing? Versus now, I'm in my 50s now. Now I think more about, am I taking time out to like really focus on what's important, not just in my business, but in my personal life? Am I a well-balanced and well-rounded individual? And how can I get the most out of not just my business, but out of my personal life has become of increasing importance.
Oh, did we lose our connection there? Nope.
Since 2007.
Yeah, 2007. And I mean, time has flown. It's almost 20 years now. Are the topics still the same?
Yeah.
Has anything evolved since you started Women in Research?
I think a lot of things have evolved. I think women are more cognizant now of the business skill sets that they need to have in order to get to the C-suite. I think part of that too has been a change that we've seen in the research industry, and you've probably experienced this yourself, which is when I first started out in research, which was in 1996, all the research companies were run by researchers. Now we have this incredible influx of venture capital and private equity money that have come into the space. And so the skill set and expectation of the C-suite or of leaders in market research firms has changed a lot, because private equity has different expectations than private business owners do. And so I do think that there's been more of a focus on trying to upskill, try to understand how to navigate that private equity world, which maybe didn't exist when you and I first started on our careers.
Yeah, probably. I do think there's this mat leave and sort of exiting and I'm sitting in Canada, you're sitting in the States. I think that one of the big questions that
we don't have any mat leave here.
Yeah, and it's interesting on our end because we have potentially a year, which is fabulous. But I remember when I actually went there, and I'm like disappearing for a full year. Like that was also kind of a big challenge, a big question mark as well. And then, do you disappear for a year? Do you disappear? Is that the actual word? I think that's still something that to this day is still going to be quite relevant, I'm sure. Right?
Yeah, I think yes, it's unfortunate in the US we don't have much of a maternity leave policy. I mean, I have spoken to women that were responding to emails from their hospital bed after just giving birth. I mean, there is a tremendous pressure to, not take as little time as possible and to come back as quickly as possible. I will say that I think the one thing that I've seen change, and this is more in recent years, I'd say in the last 5 years, is that the women that I talk to that are considering having children are being much more selective about who they partner with to have kids with. And that there is a lot more conversation up front about childcare, who's going to be working, who's going to be taking time off. And I think one of the more important decisions you can make as a woman is who you choose to have children with if you are going to have children, and to make sure that it is really an equal partnership and that you've communicated up front what those expectations are. I also think one of the other thing that's interesting is I see more of a trend of the younger generation. When I say that, I mean, millennials and particularly in Gen Z, where women are very intentionally deciding to stay child free, that they've made a proactive decision kind of early on that they're not going to have children. And that's not to say they might not change their mind at some point, but I think it's less stigmatized now than it used to be. I mean, certainly when I was in my mid 30s, early 40s, even I was receiving a lot of questions about when are you going to have children and what's your plan to have children? And, to say that I wasn't interested in having children was just taboo. I mean, if I said it out loud, people would be like, oh my gosh, she doesn't like children. I love children. And I also love it when they go home at the end of the day. So I love kids. I just love other people's kids.
And I love my kids. I don't like other people's kids. No, I'm kidding. But just the other day, I think 2 weeks ago, we were in a discussion with a fellow sort of female in the industry. And she said, well, if I'm interviewing for a job, I still don't I don't wear my wedding ring. Yeah,
Really?
which flabbergasted me. I'm like, really? And she was like, yeah, I get all the questions that are not supposed to be asked, but still, there's still kind of this notion of where are you at in life? What life stage are you at? There's something to be said about that, which is,
Yeah.
so as much.
You're not really supposed to ask it. I mean, you're not supposed to ask in the
Well, you're
United
not in
States, but
Canada
the funny,
either. But I thought it was
right.
interesting that she didn't want to open it up, or even just took that completely off the table by not intentionally wearing her wedding ring, which I thought was interesting.
Right. Yeah, I had a board interview just a few years ago where at the end of the interview, it was for an international firm, so I would have to fly back and forth between the US and Europe a lot, which I do anyway. I live part-time in Greece, but one of the guys interviewing me said, you travel a lot. Are you in a relationship? And I said, yes, I have a boyfriend, and he said, well, what does he think about you traveling all the time? And I said, I have no idea. What do I think about him traveling? I mean, it's not even relevant to this conversation.
Yeah.
So I do think there's still a double standard where the expectation is, if you're a woman, that either are not partnered, or if you are, that a man is not going to tolerate you traveling around. And again, I think this goes back to being very intentional about who you choose to partner with in your personal life.
And what would you say are the biggest successes of the most recent years for women in research?
Certainly our mentoring program, which I know you're involved in. So thank you for volunteering to mentor. It's a labor of love, this mentoring program. We match literally hundreds of women one-to-one around the globe every year with mentors. I think that has a huge impact. The other program that I'm really proud of is our Accelerate program. So this is a program that came to fruition out of a Wire exec conversation that we were having. So a Wire exec is our executive forum. So it's a separate forum for women who are in C-suite roles or in founder positions. And we were having a discussion about, hey, what are all the things that you wish you'd known before you moved into a C-suite position? And most of those were business skills, and some were soft skills too. So negotiation, how work-life balance, financial management, all of these topics that come into play once you move into those more senior roles. And so Tiama Hansen-Drury, who now sits on our board, she created sort of the outline and the ideation around this Accelerate program, which is a self-paced online learning program where women and men can come on and go through the course. It's self-paced, and receive a certificate from the MRS that says, hey, they completed Accelerate, and here's all the business skills that they learned as a result of that. So, and that program has been wildly successful. We've had people from all over the world of all ages, genders, complete that program, and we're looking at expanding that out in the coming year.
Nice. And you feel like the struggles are still pretty much the same?
Boy, that's
It's
a
a
tough
tough one,
one.
I know.
To a certain extent, I mean, I do think that there's a lot more focus um, on, I guess, folks are a lot more cognizant of the fact that women need to be in the room and play a part, not just be at the table, but actually be acknowledged and be able to give input, because there's a difference between having a seat at the table and actually being able to interact and be impactful. So I do think that's changed. When one of the earlier programs that we launched at Wire was our 50-50 initiative, which was all about how do we get 50-50 representation on stage. And I'm really proud that that's had a huge impact on the industry. I think if you look at conference programs now, they're a lot more balanced than they used to be. You'll almost never see an all male panel anymore. There's always a mix of genders. And a mix of ethnicity. I think we've done a lot to push diversity up on stage. It's just now I think the focus really is on those executive positions, on CEO positions, on C-suite positions. If you look at the Hannah Michael 50, I think the last time I looked at it, roughly 10 to 15% of CEOs were females of the 50 largest research companies. Like that's just not enough. So that's really where we're putting increased focus, I think, in the coming years.
And it's interesting. So on Friday for March 8th, so I sit in Montreal right now. I share my time across Toronto and Montreal, but I'm in Montreal today. And it was really interesting how there was an article in Quebec that said about Quebec actually being at the forefront. And there were some stats that came through that, like, I think if memory serves me right, it was something like 48% of Parliament are females. Like there's a parity aspect. So in the rankings, Canada would be something like 60 something, but if Quebec was considered on its own, it would be like ranked 10th in the world, which I thought was really interesting. And it has an entire impact on sort of the definitions of success, childcare, how they structure different resources, the legal system. It has a resounding impact in how the lifestyle is actually structured, which is really interesting. It's really interesting.
I think what's interesting about diversity and having programs that are designed to benefit women is that they also benefit men. So if you have better childcare, if you have better services for women, if you have more flexible work structures, all of those things, they don't just benefit women, they benefit men as well. Men benefit from that. And I think sometimes there's too much focus on, we're doing this for women, or we're doing, it's just like having, a greater gender diversity on boards. Boards that are more diverse have been, those companies have been shown to perform more favorably than companies with all white male boards. So it's not just putting a woman into a position for that position's sake. It is really about how are we going to improve the performance of the business, of society, whatever realm we're talking about. But the impacts, again, are not just for women. They benefit men as well.
Yeah, and it really is interesting how, to your point, it is about, like, the starting point is getting women there, and then it's about empathy and listening to them and really making sure they have an impact. We do see things differently. There's an empathy. There's exponential empathy that comes from having, diversity and inclusion, at the decision maker sort of standpoint, to the extent that in Montreal today, if someone in the corporate world, if a father to be actually says, I'm not going to take pat leave, everybody will just say, what's wrong with you? It's to that extent, like the tables have, not that they necessarily take a year, but there is that entire sort of, it's been completely flipped on its head, to the extent that we're saying, kid number one, I stayed home. And then kid number two, he stayed home because the government allows it. So it's interesting how policy also, it's like a perfect storm, right? Up to a certain point, and putting it all together. It's not just, it's not up to just one person. There's a system behind it, built on it.
Yeah. It's interesting. What's interesting too is that I've had a number of friends and colleagues in this industry that have, when they have decided to have children, have chosen to move overseas and outside of the US. so that they do have access to better healthcare, better maternity or paternity leave, and have made decisions to leave the US because of that.
Yeah.
So
I think it is sort of back to sort of our earlier starting point. It is about acting with greater intention at a more holistic level of how you structure your life based on what you want.
for
Yeah.
sure.
Based on what you want and where you want to go. And so what would be like projecting on and looking to the future from five or maybe 10 years from now? What
Mhm.
is your biggest wish for women in our industry?
I mean, my biggest wish is that we don't have to talk about this anymore. I mean, if I don't have to talk about it anymore, it means it's not an issue
Yeah.
anymore. It's interesting to me. We every 5 years we run an industry survey about gender parity, and we just are not making progress fast enough. The last time we ran the survey, I think by the time we reach gender parity in the C-suite in this industry, I'll be dead. I mean, that's just too long. So I think that's my greatest wish is I wish we didn't need women in research anymore. I wish we didn't need that organization, that vehicle, because if we didn't need it, that would mean that we've reached parity, but we're still a long way off.
Yeah. And what is the biggest thing we have to work on? Like if you had your top 3 priorities or something, what are the things we really need to focus on to make that happen?
I mean, for sure, the maternity and paternity leave is a big one because where we see a lot of women dropping out of the industry is when they have children. So they have children, they either drop out entirely or it takes them a while to come back, or they come back, but it takes them years and years and years to get promoted after that. I think when I started in my career, the expectation was that I would always be working. Always. There was no time not to be working. And this was, I started out when I don't want to age myself, but you just started using computers.
Yeah, no,
So,
I remember that. I was there. I know how to remind and be kind and rewind. Like I'm right there
right.
with you.
So it was great then because you worked really long hours in the office, but you didn't have to take work home with you because there was really no way to do it at home. Now you're sort of expected to be on and wired 24/7, and that's really hard, particularly if you have children. So I think that I think that's the biggest thing. Also making sure that you're not only offering maternity policy but also paternity. I think if men haven't understand the expectation is, they're going to take time off as well, and that there's really a partnership there, and it's not just this very one-sided. Oh yeah, the woman had the baby, and now the woman needs to stay home, for a certain period of time. I think that's a big a big barrier that we can remove, and then also I think as much as some people don't like this hybrid work from home environment, the fact of the matter is that it has really positive impacts for women. There are a lot of women that are able to either come back to the workforce or, never leave the workforce because they have the ability to work from home. And so because of that, they're not spending hours a day commuting in. They can be more present for their children at times when it's important, immediately after school, before they go off to school. And so I think anything that we can do to support women in the workplace, that's going to have the greatest impact just in terms of our just in terms of gender parity and really being able to move forward with more of this 50-50 split, particularly in the C-suite.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of work to be done also on understanding what your priorities are. I think acting with intent through and through is really important. Like I found like throughout the entire thing. So as a quali, like I just came back, I had just a crazy 2.5 week where I literally moderated 38 focus groups across probably 4 time zones and, quite a few cities, to the extent that I'm like, oh, I watched this on the plane. And then someone said, which plane? I'm like, I don't remember. like there's something that happened on the plane from Vancouver to, and I'm like, I don't know which one. Was it back? Was it trip 1 or 2? And it really is my life. Like it's my reality. Like I haven't had dinner I don't have dinner with my family on a daily basis. And it's interesting because no one has ever asked me, how do you do it, for some reason? Because I've successfully been able to project this notion that I don't work weekends. I do get up in the morning, even I flew out on a red eye. I still get up in the morning and I do breakfast. Like, I think it's this notion of helping people figure out what's important and where it matters. Also, going back to acting with intent, because you can't do it all. You can't have it all at once. So I do think life is long, and that's a privilege and a pleasure. I mean, you can have different phases, right? So I think there's also that don't lose sight of the big picture and focus on what matters.
For sure. And I think too that your priorities change too as your career evolves. There are certain things that are going to be important to you early on in your career versus things that are more important to you later on, like we were sort of talking about earlier.
Yeah.
The things that were important to me at the beginning of my career are much less important to me now. I have a whole new set of priorities. So really having an understanding and spending some time being thoughtful about it. I mean, one of the things that every year we run 2 Wire exec summits. So these are the summits for the executive level women in the industry. We run one in the US and one in Europe. And one of my favorite parts about those summits is that we do intention setting every year. So we're very clear about like, what's our intent for the coming year? What is it that we're trying to get out of our business or out of our life? And that theme can change from year to year to year. And it's been interesting being with this group of 50 plus women that come to these events. And it's a different mix of women every year, but it is interesting to see how those intentions evolve over time.
And are they clearer? Are we getting better at sort of being self-aware and sort of taking charge and claiming ownership of those intents?
I think so, or at least the women that are involved in the exec program are. I think part of that is the expectation of doing intention setting and the fact that you're going to come back 12 months from now and have to report back about how well you did, And
that will do it.
Yeah, and for some people, it's a personal goal. For others, there's a business goal. I will say the one thing that I'm really proud of for our exec summits is that we run a parallel program in all of our exec summits called the C Track. And those are women that are maybe in VP or more junior positions, directors who want to get into a C-suite position. And so they're really looking for these very direct and senior level mentoring opportunities. And I think 10% of our attendees at these exec events are C-Track. And we've seen a measurable change in terms of those women be able to get in C-suite positions. I think maybe we've been running the C-Track for maybe 5 or 6 years now. We've had almost a dozen women that started out in those more junior level positions that have evolved into C-Track or started their own businesses. So having access, I think, to women who are more senior and can provide more guidance and mentoring opportunities, I think can be really impactful.
And it is different to be mentored by a woman than mentored by a man, no?
I mean, we have men that participate in our mentoring program as mentors. I think women can identify different issues than men have, but I do think that there's a lot of power in having, a male mentor who might be able to provide perspective that you might not get otherwise, and might have a different view on things. And particularly if you are working in a male-dominated company or in a male-dominated role, like for me, I sort of grew up more on the tech side of the business. If I hadn't had male mentors, I think I probably would have missed out on some very insightful information that I probably wouldn't have gotten because there weren't women in companies doing what I was doing. So I think it really just depends on, what role you're in. Do you have access to the right mentors and the right talent? And I think sometimes that's a female mentor and sometimes it's a male mentor.
Excellent. And so just because I believe in the mentorship program immensely, just because I'm a mentor. I've been sort of a mentor in different sort of forms, different programs, but I do feel like the Wire one is quite well structured and well done. And there's a good tracking point. The pairing works well. There's something really meaningful, both from a mentor and I think a mentee standpoint. So it is a win. And so how about I just give you sort of a chance to plug it in, because I just believe in it. And I think more people should just sign up.
Yeah. And I would say too, if for some reason you sign up for the program, we've already finished matching for this year. So if you're interested in getting a mentor, check back in November. That's when we, sort of do our call for applications for mentees. If you are someone who wants to mentor, so if you have 10 years or more of experience in the industry, please reach out to me or to Michelle Andre, who's our managing director at Wire. We're always taking names for folks who want to mentor. That's I spend a lot of time kind of drumming up interest in serving as a mentor, because I also think, and you might be able to comment on this, Isabel, but I do think that our mentors get just as much out of it as our mentees do. I mean, I've had mentors comment that they've learned a lot from their mentee, and that they're actually getting upskilled on maybe some things that they weren't particularly skilled at.
Yeah, I think I would agree. I think there's something about there's some programs and some structures that you feel like you're giving and it's very generous, and there's something about giving. But I do think the matching is quite well done. And so there is this ability to actually, and I think for some reason I've been matched with someone this year that really has brilliant questions and brilliant reflections. And I feel like my mentees really invested, which I think also sort of sets the stage for me to really show up in respect, just to match her level of enthusiasm. But I think her questions are maybe questions that I've never been asked, or that are actually quite sparking good debate and good conversation. And sometimes I'm like, okay, well, you know what? I've never looked at it that way. I've never considered it that way. Let me take it. And then we work the problem together or answer the question together, which I think is really interesting as well. So it is kind of a win-win, sort of very back and forth kind of situation in that sense, which I've rarely seen, which I think is really amazing. Maybe because it's more holistic. I think there's something, because it is so much more personal, faster, quicker. I feel like it's not just work. It's not just homing in on a topic, a part. It's so much more holistic and bigger. So it spills through and it becomes more personal, more meaningful, faster, I guess.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we've done really well with the mentoring program, I mean, we spend an incredible amount of time matching, obviously. So, and we do a fair amount of work with the mentees up front. Making sure they understand what the expectation is going into a conversation. As you might be aware, we have a check-in sheet that we ask people to fill out, which is, what was your personal best, your business best, your personal worst, your business worst. Those are all good conversation starters going into a mentoring session, because then you really have an understanding of what headspace the person is in and where you could be the most helpful, I think, from a mentoring standpoint.
Yeah. And I think the personal best is kind of interesting. Sometimes at work, you don't want to bring in your personal life necessarily. You do want to sort of, up to some point, not play all your cards.
Right.
But it's kind of nice to have that structure so it does sort of overflow, because they're so intertwined, so closely intertwined. And so the conversation's freer, probably more intentional. There's something really more candid and open about it for some reason.
For sure. Yeah. There's a consortium that my ex-business partner, Jamin Brazil, and I run. And one of the things we do at the beginning of every meeting is we just do a one-word check-in, which we find is really helpful for understanding what the mindset is of the person that we're talking to. Because if you're coming off of like a horrible call, or you're flustered, or you're overwhelmed, those are all things that can impact the quality of the conversation that you're about to have. So having an understanding of what someone's headspace is and giving them an opportunity to reset at the beginning of that conversation, I think, is really important.
Yeah. How do you do that?
How do we reset the conversation?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's just the person acknowledging that they're stressed or frustrated or angry or whatever, and then saying, like, let's just park that for the next 30 minutes or an hour. What is it that we're trying to accomplish today? How do we get the most out of that time? And sometimes it is talking just about that frustration or disappointment or anger, whatever feeling it is, or celebrating a big win. Those are all things that I think play into, mentoring and coaching, is just to be cognizant of the mental state that somebody is in going into that conversation, which can have a real impact, not just on what you discuss, but on what the outcomes of that conversation are.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. Thank you so much back in 2007 for starting all of this.
Yeah.
And hopefully we're successful and we actually can start talking about it. I don't know if will ever be able to stop talking about it. So I feel like there's always going to be a generation maybe taking it for granted somehow, which a good reminder message might be interesting, but we'll see.
Yeah.
I hope we get to reminder message.
I think so too. I hope so too. I mean, I hope that, I think that there is a push, at least in the US, to undo a lot of the diversity initiatives that have been put in place by, past government administrations, which is disappointing. And I'm hopeful that we continue to progress forward instead of regressing. So fingers crossed.
Yeah. Fingers crossed for sure. And so I think you're on to sort of what we do, because there's always a French twist with me, because I do speak more than one language, as you do. But so I ask questions for a living, and I really like Bernard Pivot's Bouillon Culture, because I like the questions, and so there's this book, which you're probably aware of, which I love, which is 200 Women, because I collect coffee table books.
Mm-hmm.
And for listeners out there that don't know it, it is 200 women that are globally sort of cast and sort of chosen for different reasons. They have different stories to tell, and they actually went out and asked these 200 women the 5 same questions. And Bernard Pivot kind of did the same thing. It was celebrated sort of through Actor Studio and James Lipton and whatnot. So I picked kind of the 4 key ones that I really like to wrap up every episodes. And so here we go, because you've sort of wanted to plan. So the first question is, what profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I originally had planned to go back and go to law school. I was planning on being an environmental attorney. So my father's a botanist. I'm really into the outdoors. I've always been a big advocate for the outdoors. I've served on the board of the Nature Conservancy. Protecting wild spaces is really important to me. And so I thought for sure that I was going to be an environmental lawyer. That was my whole career path. And then I worked my way through college at a social science research firm. And that was all she wrote. I got hooked. I got sucked into the research vortex. So I never made it to law school. But if I had to choose another profession, that's what it would be.
Yeah, I think I've never heard someone say the research vortex, but I do think that's dead on. Like, that's exactly what it is. I feel we all stumble on it. Yeah, I think there's something that, everybody stumbles about it and then they stay. It sticks. Yeah. I think that I will definitely quote you on that one.
Yeah.
What is your favorite word?
Can I choose 2 words?
Oh, sure. Go for it.
My favorite word to hear is "you're right."
It's the lawyer in you, or the one.
It really is. Yeah, it really is. Yeah. I would say if I had to choose just one word, it would be yes. I work a lot on sales and marketing initiatives. As you can imagine, when you work in a sales role, you get told no a lot. So yes. But by far my favorite phrase is "you're right." I love being right. I love it. I'm not right all the time, but I enjoy it a lot when someone says that. Yeah.
Excellent. What is your least favorite word?
My least favorite word is just based on the sound, and I think it's a lot of people's least favorite word, but the word moist. Every time I hear it, it sounds like it is that word, moist sounds moist. And every time someone says it, I'm just cringing inside.
You do know Canada has this whole thing with moist, and there's a viral video around it.
Right?
Yeah. Not that I want to, bring it back up, but it just
the trauma.
It struck a chord there. There's a whole amazing. And I think this is the best one for you. And so what is the best thing a mentor has told you, or the one thing a mentor has told you that stayed with you that you still to this day kind of use?
The best piece of advice that I ever received was actually from someone at a cocktail party in New York who was not a mentor nor even in this industry. But they said to me, because I was just describing like my workload and how stressed I was and all of these things that I was doing. And the best piece of advice I ever received was, don't let perfect get in the way of good enough. And that sounds horrible to someone like me who's type A, who wants everything to be perfect all the time. It is not possible. Not everything is going to be perfect. Not everything is going to be done the way that you want it done. And this, I think, has been the key to the success and the growth of Wire. So when we started out with Wire, I was doing everything myself. I was sending all the email invitations. I was managing everything. I was going to every single event. And at some point, you have to let go of things if you want them to grow. You can't hold on to things so tightly. And I was really, really fortunate to bring Michelle Andre on board as our managing director. And Michelle is awesome. Does she do everything the way that I would do it? No, but she does an awesome job. There's nothing wrong with the way she's doing it. It's just not the way that I personally would all the time. But it's good. And I wouldn't even say it's good enough. It's great. Might not be exactly how I would do it. Not everyone at Wire communicates things the exact same way that I would do it, but it's good enough. It gets the job done. You know, the organization is growing, and I would say the same thing for my businesses. The more I let other people lead and take the reins and give them the opportunity to grow, the better off the business is and the quicker it scales. So.
And what skill set has that? That's not part of it. I'm totally probing here, but what skill set has that sort of obligated you up to a certain point to build or to fuel as a result?
The skill set for me?
Yeah, if you have to let go, you learn how to let go, and therefore
Yeah.
what you learn to do as a result of letting go.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to learn to trust people and to hire the right people, to hire people that really understand the vision of what it is that you're trying to create and are capable of taking that vision forward in a meaningful way. You know, it's not any different with Jen and myself at Growgetter. You know, Jen and I launched this company last May. She and I had a long conversation before we launched it about her taking the CEO role. I really don't want to run a company and have employees again. That phase of my life is over, but I also really believed in Jen and believed in what she was capable of, and she's knocking it out of the park. And it wouldn't be the success it is right now if I was holding on so tightly and trying to control everything that she does. She's very capable, and she's doing an amazing job building not only the brand but the agency in general.
Yeah. It all comes back.
So part of that is just being comfortable with trusting and letting go of things. It's hard, and it's hard when you're like, I am by nature a type A control freak. I want things done my way, but you just have to make a trade-off. Do you want it done your way, or do you want it done?
Yeah, and I think, do you want, like, what's the next generation about? Like, at one point you can't control it and just keep the next generation at bay. You need to also make sure that they surpass you. There's someone the other day that said, you're not a real, and I don't know how you feel about that, so let me throw it out. You're not an amazing leader. You're not done as a leader until you've made a leader.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. So you have to step aside.
You really do. And the more that I do, I think it's like a muscle that you have to exercise too. I think the more that you do it, and of course, you're always going to make missteps. Sometimes you put people in a role that's too big of a role for them, or they're not ready for it, or they need more coaching and mentoring. You know, and the good folks will ask for that, and they'll express concern about it. But sometimes all that's keeping someone from moving from point A to point B is somebody having faith in them and giving them that boost, that leg up, and to say, hey, I'm going to give you this opportunity. And I've been very fortunate in my own career to work with people that gave me those types of opportunities. And I want to give those to the next generation of folks.
Yeah. It's really interesting because I always go back, because I'm the third generation of Silva, so third generation of owner. I didn't found it. And I went back to sort of the previous owner and I said, so you made me, like, what did you do? What can I learn? And she obviously just came back and said, I just stepped out of your way. And I'm like, oh, interesting. I'm like, okay, so I need to do that.
It's not a small thing.
No.
It's not a small thing.
It's a really interesting piece of advice. Well, Kristin, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. I think we had a meaningful conversation. I think let's keep an eye on Wire. I think it's a fabulous thing. Let's keep plowing through so that we get to that reminder message kind of place and we don't have to talk about it as often. Yeah, that would be amazing.
Yes, I would love that. Yeah. Thanks for hosting me. This has been great.
Of course. And for everyone listening, do please like us, join us, sign us so you don't miss out on the next episode. Episode 8 will come up shortly. Please subscribe, tell all your friends, and I'll catch you soon. Thank you.